Little notice that this is part 2 of a two-part video essay. If you have not seen the first part, I would recommend doing so before watching this one. I'll leave a link to it below if that sounds interesting at all. If you have seen it though, I hope you enjoy the finale to this.
Are you alright? It's been a week.
Dude, you need to see these memes. They're way too strong. This is certainly a story I felt like I was more along for the wild ride for rather than understood, obviously. Although, I still have some thoughts I'd like to share. A little fair warning that when I talk about media analysis, treat it more like a postulating fan theory of the work. I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm probably not a good authority on what all of this means, and I'm not going to pretend like I am. I've also done basically no research into other people's opinions on the true meaning behind this chapter, so you'll likely get some new ideas here too. Genuinely, beyond all else, I'd recommend playing the update yourself and coming to your own conclusions. So, the presence of a prominent movie director and the big twist with said character lends itself to the idea that Y2K, as in like, all of this, was a movie the whole time. Right from the beginning. That feels like a bit of a cop-out answer though, so I don't think that's what they're going for here. As I see it, the events of Y2K did happen. The basic game is canon, including its ending where realities were destroyed, barring one. The one belonging to whichever Alex survived at the end of the game, which I believe to be the one that looks identical to William. Then comes Kasage X. Through mysterious means, he became aware that tons of realities have been destroyed, and that people have died or scattered as a result. How? I'm not so sure, though in the back of my head I kind of imagine him to be a chance traveler like Vela. Perhaps his home reality was destroyed and he moved to a new one, and by a new one I mean the only one left. Within this new reality he hatches a plan to undo this apocalypse through the medium he knows best. Really pretentious movies. So he gathers up an old friend Asuka and a bunch of surviving people related to Alex, some of which know more than he does, especially Hogarth, and begins work. Then there's William. I interpret William as the personification of all the surviving Alexes crunched up into one big personality. Mostly our original protagonist Alex and Proto-Alex. He has Proto-Alex's appearance and a toxic, even less subtle entitled personality of our main Alex. And also, he's likely not aware of this himself. All he ever seems to care about is inviting people to his stupid birthday party. Kasage X sees William as the key. He's thinking that if he can create a film so inspiring and enlightening, it can awaken the inner Alexes within him, having taken the form of Omnium-Man, then defeat him and undo everything. Frankly, this is a pretty brilliant plan when you think about it. I mean, shoving Y2K's entire plot into someone's head at once could probably kill anyone. Of course, being essentially a movie adaptation of the esoteric meanings of Y2K, there's bound to be room for Kasage X to exaggerate or get some details wrong. This explains why even the more closely interpreted moments have a lot of weird remixing. For example, when you randomly fight a kaiju monster from one of his other films. And why some moments are more from the perspectives that are not Alex, or even a little wrong or misleading entirely. He's entirely writing Y2K fanfiction when you really think about it that way. This could also explain the whole Acolyte Village plot too. At face value, it doesn't really have much to do with Y2K literally speaking, but absolutely does if you look at it symbolically or from the perspective of its emotional truths. Ultimately, Kasage X is just working off the information he's been able to pull together from those around him who are still remaining, and that he has access to pick the brain of to cobble the story together as best he can. So I mentioned that memes in this universe aren't like traditional internet memes. To get back to that, I believe they're more akin to general negative traits or negative virtues, often manifested through an unhealthy addiction to internet cultures. The dictionary definition of something being mimetic is when it's passed from one person to another, spreading, before collectively being at least some forefront of everyone's minds. These are represented as these creepy tentacle pools you find everywhere that throw these negative traits that latch on to you. There is some text in this chapter referring to people being created or partially made up of memetics instead of genetics, mostly Omniscient Man. Perhaps his enlightening plan involves untangling William's memes to make him incompatible with Omniscient Man. This might be why the events of Kasage X's films are so different from the actual story, even. Everyone who matters in this plan knows the story of Y2K, at least subconsciously, so creating something so deeply off implants a new mimetic retelling of how Alex's story goes, an interpretation William would be very impressionable of. Getting him thinking that this is actually how the story went, to make him less derivative, and generally a worse host for Omniscient Man himself. A being created of the worst memes imaginable. Memes that probably destroyed reality. All this so he can be drawn out and vanquished. Hogarth has a very interesting role in all of this too. I feel like this is the same Hogarth who saw all of his parallel lives and went shirtless for like the last quarter of the game, but he's been enlightened yet again. This newfound knowledge made him realize that similar to Vela, he has also been hurt by Alex in every reality. And while Vela was more apathetic to that realization, giving our protagonist Alex a chance to, be himself, Hogarth instead made it his personal mission to hunt down the core Alex at the source, believing that outright killing him will also fix everything. And then there's the pesky line about
parallel lives exist within the reality of YIIK, but not within the reality of the player.
So, I think Y2K is breaking the fourth wall here, though in a way I've never really seen before, which I heavily respect. Parallel lives exist within the reality of YIIK, but not within the reality of the player. Him pronouncing Y2K in this manner, the way that's technically incorrect but probably how most real-life people would read this game's title at a glance, is referring to the game itself. And the player is the literal player playing the game. At one point you're asked to put in your actual name, and it's used at some pretty interesting points here and there. Particularly this reveal stands out to me a lot. So on top of Nameless Child being a stand-in for Carrie and Allison and Sammy and Chandra's brother, she is also a stand-in for the player too. I believe this to be a commentary how, unlike in video games, real life only has one canon line of events, one canon reality, and Kasage X is attempting to use this to his advantage.
I took on the task as a favor, curious to see if a mystical experience is truly possible with a game.
What? Perhaps similar to how all Alexes have been crunched into a single character, he's attempting to crunch all realities that have existed into a single reality, similar to how they would work in real life. One of a preferable outcome, no less, which he's also orchestrating. After all, if you save the single reality to exist, in a way you're saving all realities. And that's my analysis. Again, I encourage you to see my feelings towards the story more as headcanon. I'm willing to accept and even expect that this is way off from the true intentions of the story, though the ability to come to a ton of different conclusions I think is part of the magic of off-the-wall stories like this. I also ultimately see Y2K to be a story about how bad information can ruin lives. Bad information is a vague way to word it, but I only do so because it's an evil that can take many forms. For example, the way Sammy's disappearance was reported, turning her into no more than a footnote, the way her story was creepily shared on Omniscient 1999, kicking off so much of this story, Alex being a bad narrator during his own monologues, Hogarth hiding who he is, Roy's lie putting others in danger, being told the Essentia 2000 lies to a degree that you're not sure who you can even trust anymore. The propagation of malicious memes and vices creating such a monster of a character, misinformation, miscommunications, bad faith retellings, omitting details, white lies, bald-faced lies, dishonesty in one form or another plagues nearly every aspect of this world, and eventually snowballed into its demise and also doomed its recovery. Yeah, God, this story's making me think, dude. But seriously though, I do encourage you to play the game yourself and come to your own conclusions, but as for me at least, This is how I read the story of Y2K2 Benevolent Psychosis. Another element of the game I was pretty curious to see about if they change it all is how Sammy is handled. I'm not going to go through the whole story again, but long story short, Sammy and her disappearance are based off of the story of a real-life person, Elisa Lam, a woman staying at a Californian hotel who was found dead in said hotel's water tower, and the only clue to how she turned up there was a disturbing video of her acting strangely in an elevator about a week prior. Was she attacked, kidnapped, stalked? Was it of her own volition? It's a mystery that captivated the internet to a point of this tragic death, turning more into something people would go all game theory over rather than treat with any kind of levity. She became an urban legend, in other words. Heck, Y2K isn't even the first media to use her story as inspiration. But it still raised a lot of eyebrows for its confusing implementation and the general tactlessness of using a story this tragic and personal in this manner. And how I see it, I feel they addressed this as best they can given how deep of a hole they dug themselves into by adapting the story in the first place. I think an important aspect to understanding Sammy is to understand why they chose a story like Lamb's to base her on in the first place. Her entire character is practically a commentary on how creepy and obsessive people can get over missing persons, given, it's Alex's primary motive for the majority of the game. We gotta find the girl, we gotta save the girl, like in a video game, which Alex knows a lot about. He's determined and sees himself destined to be her knight in shining armor. Alex's flawed perception of how black and white the world really is a catalyst for this. To that degree, the developers chose Elisa's story to adapt specifically because it's a story people acted the exact same way over. In my original video, I brought up the game Harvester for like 2 seconds and mentioned that it had themes of violence desensitization. To elaborate an example from that game that kind of ties into this, at one point you visit a school called YIIK Elementary. If you recognize that name, that's gonna put you on edge. YIIK was a terrifying serial killer, although the thought of just some random school in this universe memorializing him gets this idea in your head that murder and death is just that normal in Harvester. It implants those themes about them having to make a whole murderer backstory and a brand new character because people know the name YIIK and what it's associated with. It's essentially coding when you think about it. How do you establish that a character is a victim of a mysterious disappearance besides writing it that way? Base them off an actual real-life example. Could they have driven this point home without using her story? Absolutely yes, but doing so in this manner instantly makes things a bit more real, and narratively obvious how they're using the story if it's taken inspiration from it well, which in the original I really don't think was the case. However now, it just comes off better. There's a really common theory that Alex never actually met Sammy. He saw her story posted on Omnis in 1999, and then the entire hotel dungeon where you meet her was just some daydreaming he made up in his own head. If you pay attention to how Elisa's story is referenced in Sammy, this makes a lot of sense too. The biggest allusions is the creepy video that was shared online, and the internet's preceding obsession with her, but besides that, they practically share nothing in common at all. Elisa wasn't abducted by aliens. She didn't have a cat, at least not at the hotel. Sammy literally doesn't even know what an elevator is. The very scene where she is abducted has been remixed now to a degree of being absolutely over the top. Her body was debatably, this one's more of a theory, found somewhere completely different from the location of the abandoned middle-of-nowhere New Jersey hotel Alex visited. A detail that I, by the way, dinged as a negative in my original video, but the game presenting this information better now got me seriously reconsidering it. Again, another example of the entire game being more competent, improving an element that was originally terribly communicated and taken very poorly. I have a personal theory that the developers took a lot of criticism they got involving this to heart as well, because yeah, at the end of the day, it is just a little too real of a story for a game like this, among other morality issues. Like, say for example, I didn't know about this at the time, but I think, like, the family issued a statement saying they don't like it when people adapt her story, you know? But you can't remove Sammy from Y2K. It's non-negotiable, as her and her similarities to Elisa are so integral to the story that to remove them would make for a fundamentally different game. So what they decided to do was to respectfully pull her back. I paid really close attention whenever Sammy got any screen time this time around, and a thing I noticed is that the further I got in, the more her character felt divorced from her original source material, especially in the new content. Her current similarities to Elisa are minimal now, used just enough to establish what they're going for with them, and then are promptly moved on from. I'm reminded a bit of Petscop, a fantastic fake game horror story that had the unfortunate elephant in the room of basing one element of its story off of a real-life story of abuse. When the creator was told that this is really tasteless to feature in what is essentially just a creepypasta, they apologized and never referenced the story like that again, given too much of the story was written and the detail was too important to entirely remove this reference, but they did their due diligence to be respectful in light of being told of this mistake. It's mature and responsible. We never got an official statement from the Y2K team or anything about this, but I say this as a case where actions speak louder than words, and their actions and dedication to rewrite what they can, I found it commendable. Like, I feel like not a lot of devs would ever really do something like this. If the inclusion of Elisa's story being used in this way is still a turnoff for you, however, I honestly think that's perfectly valid, but I ask that you just understand. There is clumsiness in all of this for sure, but never malice, and there's been a genuine attempt to make as many people as they can happy with how they addressed it. I think that's worth at least giving them a little credit for. Something else I was curious about was all of the new music. Okay, if you can't tell by now, this video has no real structure, I just want to rant about stuff as it comes to mind. Y2K has always had a really good OST, with tons of expressive, unique, diverse tracks for all sorts of situations from all sorts of genres. This is another thing I associate highly with Earthbound-likes in general, and this game pulls it off pretty fantastically. It's the kind of thing where even people who hate Y2K tend to find at least one song they really connect with. Typically this one. Though my personal favorite songs were always Hipster-Bound, Pushing Through, and Carry On. This game also does something I love, where, to help its soundtrack have a little bit of everything, they enlist the help of several composers to each add their own contributions to the game. I mean, why not? If you're going for a diverse soundtrack, why not hire a diverse range of people as well? It's something I'm honestly a little shocked I don't see more developers do. I swear as I was looking through this OST, like every few songs had a different composer. Even in the YIIK I.V update, which advertises itself as having 45 minutes of new music. I just want to go over some new personal favorites and why I like them here. Monster Den 1 Seppu is a very weird song that feels like the least prominent part of itself is the melody. It's hard to explain. Lots of instruments that don't feel like they mix well, but it just comes together into something oddly catchy. I love the slap bass. This feels almost like Genesis music in my head for as little sense as that makes. Heck, I shared it with another friend and they mentioned that it sounds a bit like something from Dicey Dungeons. I just don't know what to make of it, and I kinda love it because of that. Return to the Blackened Pond feels like the perfect thinking music, just energetic enough to keep you motivated while also not fighting for your attention. I get like detective vibes from this song. One of these days I would love to use this as a placeholder theme for a puzzle room in our RPG I make or something. It's just fun to listen to while untangling a complicated mess before you. Little Eye's Yicking Out edition, yes, that's what it's called, is a remix of a song that played during the New York City segment of the original game, and it is absolutely unhinged. It starts with this beautiful, slow, and inspiring piano along with backing vocals of a guy who sounds like he's on the verge of tears himself.
All these little eyes staring down, none of them hear me call.
Why did I spell tears that way in my script? Before slowly adding on more instruments, the music swells, it gets more ambitious, and... okay, I'm not going to explain how we got here, but this is what the halfway point of the song sounds like. This song is 8 minutes long, by the way. It's so good, dude. I unironically love this. Okay, so something a little personal about me is I tend to not like video game music with vocals. I have this little personal theory that something that separates video game music from a lot of traditional music, it's its passiveness. Music made for the radio or a movie or a music video assume they have your attention. They lend themselves a lot to active listening, which is rewarded by a lot of that music being synced or designed perfectly to line up with cues or bits of animation. Vocals, in my opinions, are a big example of how music like this can do this. Video game music doesn't really work like this because you can theoretically be doing anything at any point in any given song that happens to be playing. Video game music is meant to complement an experience and set the mood, instead of being intrinsically intertwined with it. That's not to say that video game music isn't as important as music in other mediums, it's just that how it's used is very different. Music like this tends to be more passive, easier to listen to while doing something, easier to run in the background, easier on the autism brain. You know, if any of you ever get into that awkward conversation with family or coworkers where they ask what type of music you're into, and all you can think to reply with is video game music, I encourage you to try explaining it this way. I have myself, and I think it made for a better talking point than I expected. And if they ever ask for an example of this, do not show them how to vex your enemies. This song plays during the battle tutorial, and it is a genuinely hilarious piece of music. The underlying instruments and bass line do it all. They don't fight for your attention, they let you think, generally more passive in general, but the whole time, there's just this guy talking as if you're asking to fight him personally.
You frontin', bruh? Trying to step up? Trying to take my crown? Nah, I'm not about that. No way.
His ramblings are so stupid. I swear at one point he just keeps saying yup over and over again. I don't know you, I don't care, I'm gonna kick your derriere is the funniest single lyric I've heard from any song in years. In a way, I can't help but feel that I was more confused on how the battle system worked after being taught it to this song, but I also wouldn't have it any other way. Being a little confused all the time feels very in line with the YIIK experience, and I can't help but see this almost as a perfect tutorial music as a result. Y2K in general has a lot of music with lyrics, which, as I explained earlier, typically isn't my thing, but I tend to love its implementation here, despite my usual preferences. Because all of these songs typically have really interesting or creative ways to use their said lyrics, or break the norm or your expectations. You know, like an Earthbound-like. My headcanon is that these specific lyrics are what's going through this creature's head. There are two songs in particular that really stuck out to me though. I'd say these are probably my two favorite songs in the game, at least from the new music. The first one being Slaying Cyclops Kaiju. This feels like a song that most people won't think too much of, but it kind of hit me hard emotionally when I first heard it. First off, it is a weird song. I know, what's new. Honestly, at this point, I think this whole soundtrack just has a thing for being super experimental and unlike anything you've ever heard. It's such a mishmash of instruments and vocals that make no sense. It honestly feels like someone just messing around with a music program. It kind of feels like it's in an uncommon key signature too. A music friend I shared this with also told me that it has an odd number of measures. With that in mind, I think why this track really stood out to me was because besides the intro fight against Crow, It's the first battle theme you hear in the post-game chapter. This song fills me with this feeling of uncertainty. I've heard things about this part of the game, but wasn't quite sure what I was getting myself into. I didn't know if this was going to be 10 minutes or 10 hours, if it was going to be what kind of tone it was going to have, like how original it was going to be, and this track kind of encapsulated that confusion I was feeling. It helps that, well, this song is kind of catchy too. That singer going, "alright," is something I repeat in my head occasionally now. My other favorite new song, and probably my new favorite song in Y2K in general, is Motherfucking Jerk. That's what it's called. This is an angry, vulgar song. It's another song of lyrics, but it's pretty hard to make out what they're even saying. I fully believe this to be intentional. It's a guy rambling about how much he hates and wants to hurt people around him that he doesn't like. It starts as just musing over thinking people around him are jerks, and ends with him listing ways to assault others, before spiraling into just swearing over and over again. By the end of the song, he's almost overpowered by the rest of the song entirely, and he's not even in tune with the music anymore. It's kinda scary even. This is definitely a piece of media I'll have to use sometime when I need to explain how excessive swearing can weirdly enhance something. The music itself is very sinister sounding too, and very catchy in its own right. Lots of horns, vocal samples. It comes together as something that would be pretty fantastic on its own merits, but the unhinged lyrics turns it into a song that really got me thinking. It even led to me theorizing a bit too. You want to guess where you hear this song? When you're fighting the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle guys. It's a mini-boss theme, and I tend to really like mini-boss themes a lot because I find they do tend to be pretty experimental and weirder than like normal boss music. But yeah, these pretty one-note mini-bosses got their own original theme, and it's this. That's so random that there has to be a meaning to it, right? Hear me out here. What if these lyrics are the inner intrusive thoughts of Rory? The tragic death of Rory's sister Carrie broke him emotionally in a lot of ways. She was much younger than him, so I imagine they connected a lot through cartoons or other stuff you typically associate with being for kids. And just losing her so suddenly left him in a state where he has a hard time emotionally growing up, over never having natural closure, which is why he's still kind of obsessed with this sort of thing. Combine this with his shaky home life, and I imagine that he has a lot of trust issues with people too. Maybe these are his thoughts towards us, as he doesn't see us as worth trusting yet, and doesn't know if we'll betray him by the end. Which, you can betray him by the end, like, that it comes full circle, dude. And this sort of traumatic thinking was triggered by seeing a character he really can't escape. This kind of led me down a rabbit hole of noticing other details too. Like, for example, this drawing up here in the corner. These kind of amateur Sonic recolored characters are a common way people on the internet express themselves, particularly younger children, before they develop the skills to heavily remix them and make them their own. I myself know several characters of friends that, like a decade ago, started out looking exactly like this. Because of this, I assumed that this drawing and character might have been Carrie's, but it's actually Rory's. Heck, he even has a name for it.
I didn't even leave a note. I did leave some Evil the Mousehog sketches.
Evil the Mousehog! This character is even a monster in the same sewer dungeon you fight these turtles. And when you fight them, the game uses this other song with a bit of an uncomfortable edginess to it. Rory probably has negative frustrations with this character too, like with the TMNTs. A character that keeps them in an emotionally vulnerable state, while also being sort of a comforting thing. It's complicated for them. This got me thinking up a pretty interesting headcanon. Are the Windtown sewers Rory's mine dungeon, perhaps? We see a few mine dungeons throughout the game, and generally they got that Psychonauts thing going on, where they're manifestations of the inner headspace of the character, both good and bad aspects about them. We never actually see the team enter this place, they just show up here, similar to other times you enter mine dungeons. And the place itself is also weirdly unrealistic, even by the standards of this game. The water is all these neon colors, like it's Nickelodeon slime or something. There's rocks and comically large pipes everywhere, all accumulating in the single scene that explores Rory's character the most. Another detail I noticed is that that weird poo enemy isn't found here anymore, while it was in the original, which, again, is such a random detail that I couldn't help but wonder if there's a meaning to it. Because where else would you put a monster like that other than the sewers? Unless we're not in the sewers. We're in Rory's mine dungeon. All of this, by the way, as a result of thinking just a little too hard about a single song. And I think that's ultimately why it's my new favorite theme in this game, on top of being a great mini-boss theme in its own merits too. Like, I don't know, when you've gotten me on a rabbit hole so deep that I'm taking an enemy called Shitty OC seriously, I think you kinda nailed the Earthbound-like. I want to talk about a few meta things. Firstly, I'm overall kinda happy with the attitude these developers have towards their own game these days. I get this impression that while they're passionate and think highly of their own work, they're also self-aware about and even lean a little into the notorious reputation this game has. One of my favorite examples is this plush right here. Y2K actually has some really cool merch, I think the coolest one being this actual LP disc containing music from the soundtrack that's designed after the mystical Ultima LP legend. But like, look at this plush. Look at these proportions, at how they market it. This has got to be one of the stupidest plushes I've ever seen, and the way they promote it just screams self-awareness. Especially when they had Panda right there too. Like, come on, he's literally a marketable plushie. I would have bought a Panda plush because, fun fact, they don't tell you this, but furries legally can't put humans on their plush shelves. The game's window icon and even some promotional material references the yicking out pose. On the topic of the creators too, I want to formally apologize for my factual errors I made in my original video. This picture right here is paraded around a lot as evidence that Alex is a self-insert, when in reality this isn't the creator at all. The team has videos of themselves working on the game, and this guy is not among them at all. I have been told this person is a fan who thought posing for a picture like this would be fun. I took information regarding this image at face value, and I apologize for that. I also apologize for misusing this quote. It came from an interview, and well, if you actually listen to the interview itself, it's evident that he's saying this in more of a sarcastic way. This was yet another example of me taking information at face value. There might have been other small things I've gotten wrong, and I also don't know why I was like so overly negative in the video too. You gotta remember, this is a huge video from 5 years ago after all, but honestly, those are the two biggest mistakes I want to address directly. Say, what was it I was saying again about bad information ruining lives? To this day, I don't know if the developers have even seen my video, truthfully, although I wouldn't be surprised because there are some oddly specific additions that I noticed that I made, or that I brought up in my original video. For example, you got the removal of the elements I was concerned could trigger epilepsy. At one point, I questioned why holy water was an item when this was the least religious RPG I've ever played, mostly as a joke, but I noticed they added in aspergillium too. I don't know if I said that right. The biggest one, though, was I cited Vela's Mine Dungeon as my favorite part of the game, but mentioned that my only criticism was that it had bad enemy variety. They added like 4 new enemies here, all of which are pretty creative and fit this dungeon perfectly in terms of theming. My favorites are these Vela bees, which have no Carta and like 5 health, but maxed out evasion. The trick is to experiment with what abilities in your party don't check accuracy. There's also this Matrix-looking guy who can damage you while you are menuing. I haven't seen a turn-based RPG do that since Undertale.
That looks very stressful, you know?
It's a damage race enemy! I've never seen that before. God, I love when RPGs are a bit thoughtful about which party members it gives you for any situation, too. For example, Claudio and Chandra join you right before a dungeon containing enemies that can blind your whole party at once. Love those shades, dude. I love that some status ailments have effects like this. You're meant to use Chandra's spread item ability to remove these statuses, or Claudio's Dragoon-style jump to avoid them entirely. The most mechanically fun boss in the game to me was the one from this dungeon, actually. It's a new one, the Perfume King. Alex and Rory get kidnapped, which instantly has you using a pretty unique party formation, and he's based around hindering your party with statuses, including the Nostalgia status ailment, which I believe is unique to this fight. It works like Stop, as he gives your character handheld consoles to distract them. I have never played a fight before based around the boss giving you items. It was kind of surreal. He can also confuse your party members, and I use Hogarth's ability here, where he blinds your own party to pull out his gun preemptively, so the confused characters can't attack each other. Yes! Oh, that was cool! Oh yeah, I also think it's unique how your whole party shares MP, and you start your battles with 0 MP. It got me using defense more often and valuing my abilities more. During the post-game chapter where you're playing as Nameless Child and Asuka, Nameless Child can't actually level up for story reasons. So how they make her more powerful over time is by supercharging the drop rates of enemies so you get tons of equipment. A character in a big party that gains their strength off of equipment alone is something you could base a whole game around. Like, that's a really cool concept. But even that's not enough for Y2K, as Asuka gets a throw item ability, so you can discard all of those duplicate items and weaker equipment you'll be getting too, in a way that adds to the strategy. Like, there's design here. All of this is genuinely engaging in a way the original never was, in ways most RPGs I play these days aren't even. Even my least favorite boss had me thinking up interesting ways to puzzle through it like this. In the original game, my favorite party member was Chandra, because she was the only one who felt like she had a realized gimmick besides Alex, and a pretty fun one at that. I love her design too, and how she was written as well. Though these days, after everything, I think I have 2 new favorite characters from this game. That being Nameless Child and Claudio. A character who's a stand-in for like 4 other characters straight up sounds like the kind of nonsense you'd hear from like a Kingdom Hearts game. It's absolutely my kind of weird complexity, and dare I say even sounds like something I would come up with. I like her writing too. She's a pretty good player surrogate, which I mean like literally yes, but you know what I mean. Her cluelessness to everything is equal parts funny and validating, if that makes sense. Again, she reminds me of my own character, Stress Kid, as well. When I start working on his game after I finish Michael's, I swear that'll make more sense. I always liked the Ulgrinch twins a lot, although I think these days her brother just edges Chandra out more as being my favorite character. First off, he's probably my new favorite party member. I just used him all the time, he's a lot of fun, but besides that, I find him to be the most relatable and mature of the group too. The most adult, if that makes sense. Like, you know this meme right here? He's like 3 or 4 of these things, and I find he's easy to look up to as a role model as a result. And in a game of a cast like this, that kind of means something. Yet at the same time, he isn't without genuine human flaws either. I read him as someone easily distracted or drawn into the allure of a well-written story that ultimately doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things of his life. Particularly how he bounces off Chandra in this regard too. I get this, this again kind of attitude from the 2 of them after Claudio starts getting attached to the Sammy story like everyone else does. As someone with a younger sister who's definitely smarter than me, I feel that way sometimes too. I love that he also says my favorite Spyro quote.
You gotta believe!
You gotta believe!
I don't know, I guess I just tend to have a lot of respect for characters who make me self-aware of my own flaws. Like, it kind of reminds me of when I first started watching Hamtaro and began to really connect with Maxwell. Like, I too get flustered easily over the smallest things. I too meticulously like to have everything planned and scheduled, to a degree that it can sometimes make my friends uncomfortable. I act irrationally when I feel backed into a corner or things don't go as planned. I find personal validation in being depended on, which can result in me pretending to know more on the subject than I actually do. And seeing some of my own human flaws reflected in such an exaggeratedly silly character helped me realize how I must look to others, you know? It gets me primed to wanting to improve myself. I think he's adorable too. I love his voice, his design is funny. In a show where every character shares the same brain cell, being the smart one has a lot of inherent comedy to it. Seriously, this guy is peak high intelligence, low wisdom writing, something I can't get enough of. He's definitely a new comfort character for me as well. I don't know, man. If you're on the autism spectrum, consider watching Hamtaro. It may improve your social life.
Have you ever noticed that cute little twinkle in Sandy's eyes when she's making fun of me? Or the way she says Maxwell?
I respect that the game has a proper content warning now, and even an option that I'm assuming toggles if Rory can be removed from your party by the end due to your own actions. By the way, for those of you wondering why I've been passive voicing the hell out of that topic this entire video, it's because it's a little touchier to talk about on YouTube these days. That's basically it. I think a great sign of how much I love this update is that, for the most part, most of my criticisms I still have with the game fall under the realm of nitpicks or preferences. For example, I kind of outright hate the new victory fanfare. I don't know, it just sounded more cool and unique back in the original. Pretty cool. I miss that quick zoom too as well. It's like the game is going, yeah, these guys did it. The game still crashes on occasion, though it did so far less frequently than it did back in the day. Albeit, one of these crashes was during my first time watching the ending.
Are they giving birth? What? What's happening?
The game crashed. I might have to do that over again. Which means, yes, if you're keeping track, that did mean I had to play the final boss 3 times. I had a weird glitch during the final area where a Phantom Hogarth would appear over whoever was in the first party slot. I didn't have a 4th party member or anything, he was just there hanging out. Also, I found an oversight with Claudio's Carta Slash ability that's funny in a way that I actually kind of hope it doesn't get fixed. The animation usually has the camera zooming in on his eyes in that cool anime way, very in character for him. But while he's replaced with his alternate reality counterpart, I guess his model is slightly taller because it zooms in on his facial hair instead. That is so funny. Oh, speaking of, I think this ability's damage should be tuned just a tiny bit. It's nowhere near as broken as LP Toss back in the day, but it's a group hit that began to really trivialize all normal enemy cartas by the end game. This also happened too at one point, which I have no explanation for. Huh? Why did that attack like 4 times? I swear there are some broken or unobtainable achievements, mostly due to many of them being related to those little battle micro games that have been completely replaced. In hindsight, those were really badly designed. Many of them were either too hard or too long, so it's not like I really miss them. But the idea of never being able to fully 100% the game because of this rubs me the wrong way. Is it possible to change the achievements of a Steam game at all? I think there might technically be a way to still get these if you use a code on Steam to access the original version, which, okay, I didn't test this myself, but if that is true, I am really happy something like this is still available for the preservationists in the crowd. I have a friend too who wants to try this game someday as well, but wants to play the old version first to compare them. I'm happy this is here actually, like really happy. but it really shouldn't be a band-aid fix to still get all the achievements. Speaking of 100%ing, the rewards for completing most side missions suck. Most of these missions are already pretty basic find X and kill / collected style missions, which I do have a big problem with myself anyway, and more often than not, the rewards aren't really worth it, if it's even anything more than some experience. Especially the Pog mission. Listen, I love side quests that span the whole game, and the reward is just... One of them was $1,000. That's it? What? That was horrible. No hyperbole, this was probably the most underwhelmed I've ever been with a side quest in a very long time. If I bothered to do this back when I first played this, I probably would have dedicated a whole section to this in my original video. Why couldn't some of these rewards have been more Carta, or those keys you exchanged for Carta? Honestly, I do wish you got access to more Carta earlier in general, although maybe that's more of an incentive to play the New Game Plus, which, again, is just the New Game Plus. For the record, I didn't touch this at all, but I have seen some footage of it, and it feels like the kind of New Game Plus that adds bonus content onto additional playthroughs. There's a super boss. Your levels can go into the triple digits. It looks like Asuka can somehow join you as a party member in the main game as well. I've heard there's an additional ending too, one that has you running around as Nameless Child in the Mine Dungeon, and it plays like an action game now. Again, what I was saying about this area feeling like a big tech demo for ideas these developers might want to pursue in the future. If any of that sounds like your sort of fun, I'd say go for it. One last thing I'd like to say is, one thing I personally couldn't make heads or tails about that I'm curious if anyone can enlighten me on is, occasionally throughout the game, you'll catch a glimpse of these characters that are a lot smoother than stuff usually in the game. Like, they cranked up the subdivisions up a few notches in Blender or something. At first I assumed maybe they were foreshadowing the post-game chapter, like maybe this is what characters in that part of the game would look like, but no. I guess consider this video's equivalent to me asking what the deal was with this kid back in the day. People answered that, by the way. Turns out Claudio and Chandra's missing brother is yet another Alex from a different reality. I could really go on, I really could, but I think this might be a good stopping point for all of this. Now, I've never played this game, but I'm aware of the infamous story behind the game No Man's Sky, a game that originally released to absolute ridicule, before the developers decide to hunker down and meticulously update their game over and over again until it became a critically acclaimed experience. It must be a lot to release a game people are so mixed on. It's something a lot of people would crack under the pressure of, myself included even. And instead of, say, like, toxically defending their game or blaming others for its failures, these developers didn't do that. They wanted Y2K to be a game everyone even remotely into weird games or RPGs or ambitious stories could get a lot out of, and honestly, I think they managed to pull off everything they set out to do here. Y2K is a really important game to me personally. At this point, it has got to be the single piece of media I have spent the longest portion of my life analyzing. The original video from the start of my first playthrough to its publication date was around half a year, and this video right now has taken me the better half of, I want to say around 5 months, just a little under a year of my life, to one game. And that's not to mention the support I've gotten over the years, the stuff I've learned about it since, how it's influenced me, the friends I've met through it. It's honestly more than just a game to me. Y2K has shaped me as a person. And it was fun and even inspirational returning to this. I love that this is now a game I can recommend to so many more people. To friends, to fans of the channel, even to some IRL family who's looking for unique games and know that I'm the unique game guy. Let me tell you, it is weird bringing this game up at family gatherings, but I have actually gotten some cousins and in-laws interested in this. I'm going to end this essay by saying something very similar to what I said at the end of my last one. This is definitely a team to keep your eyes on, and if by chance the developers end up watching this, I wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and congratulations on such a successful redemption arc. And Thank you to my friends who showed up while I was recording this playthrough as well. It wasn't as many this time around, mostly because as myself and my friend circles get older, we just have less time for stuff like that these days, but I really appreciated those of you who were able to make it. Here's the handles of a few who appeared in footage in this video. And also, thank you to my Patreon supporters, Royalblot, Trevor, Sean, Isaac, Jacob Lawson, Firestriker, and Great Wolf. That's everything for now. Please consider sharing and liking this video, it really helps the channel, and I will see you all later. Thanks for watching.